Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Sigma360's panel discussion on deploying agentic AI in compliance. We're really excited today to dig into how agentic systems are changing the operating model for financial crime compliance teams, and also dive a little bit into what governance, explainability, and oversight around AI would look like, especially in this new modern age. So before we begin, I want to let you all know that this session is being recorded. So if you have questions along the way, please do drop them in the Q&A chat. We're going to try and get to as many as possible during the Q&A portion at the end. Now, I'm going to start by introducing today's speakers. Firstly, we have Paola Battisti. She is our product lead here at Sigma360, and she leads the design and deployment of our agentic AI capabilities, also including the EDD agent that we're going to take a look at today. And then we have Danny Augusto, who is Director of Customer Monitoring at Rain. He oversees how case monitoring and review operate day to day, and he's been also evaluating how agentic tools can fit into his compliance team workflow as well. Lastly, we have JT DeNicola. He is Global Head of Sanctions and Enhanced Due Diligence at Rippling. And he brings a regulatory and program governance lens to how agentic decisions are validated and documented. He's also active 360 and super closely with us behind the scenes to help shape and validate our EDD agent and also our other agentic AI features, really just basing it on real-world compliance workflows and what he's experiencing in the field as well. So super excited to have him share his experience there. With that, let's get started. So maybe to start us off with and to set the scene, what do you guys think defines agentic AI, and how do you think it can be helpful within the realm of financial crime compliance? For example, what core use cases of AI agents do we see in teams today? And this question is open to the floor.
Yeah, if you want, I can pick it up. So thanks, Bernice, and good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here today and to represent Sigma360. So how I would define agentic AI is essentially a system that is designed with a goal-driven behavior. So it doesn't passively wait for a prompt to generate a response, but essentially it takes an objective or a specific goal. It breaks it down into multiple steps. It executes certain actions. It keeps on at a rate, and then it gets to complete the task finally. So differently from the regular large language models or legacy AI systems, it essentially responds to information that it gets and adapts the workflow. So it essentially has a capability to be autonomous into multi-step reasoning towards reaching a specific goal. Within financial crime compliance, I think very common use cases are, for example, enhanced due diligence that we are going to cover today, especially because it's a very structured, very complex multi-step investigation where the path can vary on a case by case. Other use cases, I think, which are potentially relevant are, for example, screening investigations or adverse medias investigations, SAR narrative drafting. So essentially everything which is a multi-step work that requires a judgment about what to do next and not just the ability to provide an answer to a predefined question, I would say.
And Paula, to build on that, and
Awesome.
thanks, Bernice, for the introduction. So, we as pointed out, we are very proud users of Sigma360, and we've experienced a complete transformation of our financial crime program at Rippling through the use of Sigma. I think, to build upon what Paula said, right? A standard AI tool that each of us uses, right? Claude, Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, right? It answers a question, completes a single task. When we think about agentic AI, it's basically, taking a goal, like assess this alert or complete EDD, and then independently plans and then executes a sequence of events, right? Pulls the data, checks the sources on it, adjusts its approach based on the data that it finds, and then produces a structured output, right? Without a human stepping in and say, take this step, take that step. It's automatic, right? And I think for us, where we think the core value proposition is it compresses the research stage and the drafting stage for investigative work, right? So that our analysts, our reviewers can spend their time more looking at risk and making judgment calls based on the data that it collects, which is obviously by far the most time-intensive process that we have, right? The investigative due diligence, the open source media, it really compresses that level of analysis.
Yeah, and just to build on that, and Bernice, thank you so much for the intro. I think Paula and JT hit it on the head. Like, I think when it comes to the core use cases, the way I introduce AI into, like, I work for a startup, and my previous companies is it's an extension of our team. It's another tool we can use to help us optimize our workflows, so we can get better outcomes and faster outcomes. So like JT said, the most cumbersome, it takes away the burden of the most cumbersome parts of the reviews, the data collection, the open source intelligence reviews, the gathering, the going to multiple tools to get like adverse media and PEP information. It kind of like condenses all that into one and really optimizes the workflow.
Awesome. It's yeah, definitely good to hear that like there's a lot of independent execution on the agent side, and then also that it can produce structured outputs, as you said, JT, in conjunction to what the human does as well. So since compliance teams today are being really asked to move super fast and handle a lot of volume of alerts, do you think that AI can fit into that picture, and like how can it really cooperate and collaborate with the human in the workflow?
You want me to start? I can start on this, right? This is the the age-old compliance question, right? In a non-revenue generating team, budget, efficiency gains, right? FTE, headcount. I think that working at a fast-growing fintech such as Rippling, it's really tough to keep pace with the growth of the business with their compliance controls, right? A lot easier said than done. And obviously, headcount isn't keeping pace either, right? I think you hear a lot in the news of zero headcount growth. You hear a lot of AI layoffs. I'm calling a little bit BS on those AI layoffs. I think it's a much better message to the market to say, oh, we've gained all these AI efficiencies, rather than saying we overhired in the last couple of years. But where we are seeing is that zero headcount growth mentality, right? Where essentially the expectation is that you would be able to do more with less, right? And that's where the agentic AI fits in, right? I think it also changes who you hire. Teams need to grow, right? But that growth should be weighted on individuals that have some subject matter expertise, then hiring individuals that are, say, right out of college that don't have the expertise making risk-based decisions, aren't SMEs themselves, but historically would basically collect data and analyze that data, right? I think like the important piece here, the one caveat I would say is like that efficiency gain only holds if the system that you're using works well and the underlying data feeding that agent is solid. Otherwise, you're just going to speed up bad decisions. But essentially, what we see here is zero headcount growth, right? The expectation being you gain more efficiencies, you bring in subject matter expertise to come in and make the decisions and have the agent do that laborious work that we talked about before, the investigative research.
Yeah, it's exactly that, JT. I think like, where AI fits in, and like JT said, we're uh like we cost the company money, right? And companies like Rippling, like Rain, like we're growing exponentially, right? And I think it allows us to not reduce headcount, but like JT said, be smarter about who we're hiring, and we can hire the right people who can interpret the data that the AI, that the information that the AI is given to them, so we ensure we're making the best risk-based decisions, right? You're using the best AI tool, and you have the best subject matter experts executing on what's given to them.
Definitely. I feel like it's really important to highlight that the SMEs are going to come more to the forefront, and we're not replacing anyone. We're just having them be more highlighted. And the foundation of the system itself, as you said, JT, is super important as well. So, just curious then, JT, you do governance side, sometimes you do evaluate the AI agents, see how they're operating. Based on your on validating the AI agent capabilities, what do you think an AI vendor has to have in place before you even consider it?
Yeah. choosing your AI vendor is really important, right? There's a lot of companies out there that put a .ai on their name and then sell you a bag of goods, right? And like, boy, are these folks unrelenting on research, on outreach rather. LinkedIn, private emails, phone calls, man, it's like every day there's a new AI company that pops up that says you're going to gain some efficiencies if they use their product, right? And then you may join them. They have like a fancy stage presentation to wow you with some like limited functionality. And then you peel back a layer and you kind of realize that it's a bag of goods, right? They can't articulate processes, governance is a fly-by-night operation. And then, I think where a lot of companies falter is they take shortcuts. They jump straight to AI without having a solid structural foundation. And if you don't have that foundation, that's going to lead to real unstable, unreliable products, outcomes that are in line with your decision making. You can't skip the hard work of building a really good foundation, right? And that's what I really liked about Sigma is they have the foundation and they're tacking on that AI layer. So we're not just getting an AI system that was just created over a course of a few months. We're getting the Sigma data, right? And then have the AI functionality on top of it. In terms of governance, right? I think it doesn't change in terms of the model. It's all about documentation, right? From day one, right? So like what you need as a company as you choose your vendor is to have a good explainability, right? You can see the path to a conclusion. The also important piece here is like the partnership, right? Like, what I found with Sigma is the willingness to co-build for customizations, right? The vendors worth partnering with are the ones that treat customers as like those design partners, right? And aren't just going to say like, oh, this is a finished product. It is what it is. And we've had those vendors before, right? What also you want with AI vendor selection is where feedback matters, right? So Rippling is a really unique business model. Sigma's done a really good, tremendous job here of customization. And I think like with the agents that we went live with, both first on the sanctions side, the adverse media side, and then testing on the EDD side, what is really beneficial for us is our ability to provide feedback directly to Sigma on each alert that we review, right? And I think like that real-time feedback is absolutely critical. So what we did when we first started the first couple of months, and we're doing this today, is every single agent decision or recommendation rather, not decision, because we have human in the loop, we get a thumbs up or thumbs down to Sigma, right? And then we provide feedback if it's a thumbs down, saying like where we think maybe the disposition could have been better, where we think maybe we disagree, right? And I think like that real-time feedback on the governance side is absolutely critical. So like one of my favorite stats, I won't bore people with stats here, but like when we first started looking at the agent within Sigma, we had like a 16% rate of saying like, hey, we think like there's an opportunity here to get better. Every single month that dropped 16% to then 7.8% to 1.3%. And then in July, 0, right? Which means that real-time feedback that we're providing is then going straight to these folks at Sigma. They're enhancing the model as we speak, rather than doing like 6 months of work and then providing feedback. We've already did 6 months of work, right? So providing that live feedback and making sure Sigma is a really good partner is absolutely critical to make sure that like as you execute AI agents, there's good governance around it. And I think we're going to talk a little about documentation later, but I think like that vendor selection piece is by far the most critical aspect.
Wow, JT, that was a glowing review. Thank you so much for sharing your
Well
collaboration
deserved
process
glowing
with Sigma.
review, Bernice. Well deserved.
Definitely. We at Sigma here care a lot about partnerships. We care a lot about like baking the collaboration into our process of developing AI agents. And we're really glad to hear you're as well. Like that has really helped us as well in turn shape our product and make sure that it serves our customers the best way it can. So your perspective then, Danny, just thinking about what your experience is around like overseeing customer monitoring and case review. Are you thinking the same way as JT about using agentic AI within your day-to-day and implementing it?
100%, right? There's a lot of, when we think about customer monitoring, like for like KYC, KYB onboarding, transaction monitoring investigations, There's a lot of manual work behind it. OSINT searches, like reviewing internal KYC, KYB information, UBO information, right? And where I'm thinking of utilizing AI, is very much aligned with what JT is saying, right? It's like kind of going in, taking that first pass, looking at the information that was provided, making some recommendations based on the information that was given, and then my analysts can go in, my SMEs can go in and make the best risk-based decision without having to waste their time. So I'm like, I did some projections and, where a review takes us like maybe an hour, hour and a half, like we could reduce that down to something like 30, 40 minutes, right? And I think that's a huge efficiency. And, it's like my team is just focused on doing the work that matters. And just to piggyback off of JT, I think that he like what he mentioned is like the most important thing, and is that is like being able to provide feedback to the agent, right? I think a lot of people think that we'll just buy an agent, or we'll just partner with AI and like it'll solve all of our problems. But it doesn't work like that, right? Like you need to treat it like it's an IC, right? Typologies change, workflows change, data changes, products change, and you need to train the AI and give them this feedback so they know, okay, there's this change, we want to do this. Or maybe they made a wrong decision, right? AI, like it's not perfect, right? It's just you have to, if it makes a wrong decision, it needs to have the capability to give it that feedback. Hey, it was wrong, and here's why it was wrong, so they don't make the same mistake again, just like you would in IC. So I think like it's like a continuous loop of like being able to provide feedback to it. And like I think when you're shopping for AI agents, and when I'm shopping for a vendor, that's something that I like, one of the first things I'm looking for.
For sure. I think the feedback loop is super important, and also having humans in the loop to just evaluate and audit the agent as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, I think, so we can go into that. But yeah, definitely. And as you said, JT, at Sigma, we really care about like the customer's feedback, and we really make sure to customize our solution to fit your risk tolerance and profile, and definitely not just implementing a generic solution for a customer. That doesn't go with our values at all. So this discussion about what a vendor needs in place can actually raise bigger questions about, say, like trust and accountability, especially when it comes to AI decisioning and what we have to track. So Paula, I would love to turn to you on that. From the vendor side, maybe like how do you design an agent so that its actions are auditable and also defensible from day one?
Yeah, sure, Brittany. So I would first say that auditability has to be an architectural decision. I don't think it's a nice to have. It's not a feature that you add later on. It has to be there from day one. And here at Sigma, I think it comes down to I would say three main principles, which we embedded from the very beginning. So the first thing would be we provide finding level citations, right? So the agent produces findings, but they're only true and accurate if you always have a source attached to it. So we don't want people to trust the agent just because it says so. You need to be able to actually trace back to where the agent found this information, and to have an analyst, an experienced analyst, to be able to read the piece of article, read the piece of evidence, but really be able to trust because you can actually read it and not because we said so. So having citations, it's extremely crucial. Another element I would say it's around the prompt versioning and around the governance overall. So the agent is built on instructions, right? We're going to see it later on in the demo as well. Instructions can change because, for example, a prompt is improved or because there's a new regulatory standard, and the change is not a problem per se. What we want to make sure is that each and every version is always available, and you can always trace back whenever the agent was running on a specific case. So if, for example, you are running a quality assurance program or you're going through an audit in 1 year time, you should always be able to defend the decisions that were taken 1 year before, because you can always see what the agent was configured to found, what regulatory standards were active at that time and were true at that time. And the third piece, I think, is around the execution framework. So we don't want the agent to run freely, right? So we want the agent to operate within specific boundaries. It needs to have specific constraints, and it needs to have a predictable and and bounded behavior. It shouldn't be open-ended, right? So we enforce multiple checks at the process to make sure that the agent always follows the instructions that are either given by us or given by our customers if they configure the agent. But they shouldn't run freely, right? It should be predictable, and you should trust because you can actually see how the agent is working and what is it getting the information from.
And I think what Paul,
Thank you, Paula. That
to
was
build on what Paula said, I think like having those guardrails is absolutely critical, right? Like we all see hallucinations in the LLMs that we use. So making sure that there's protections in place to limit as best you can those hallucinations is absolutely critical, right? So like that was one of the conversations we had with Paula was about what guardrails in place on this. And we got very comfortable with what she provided.
great. No, it's good to hear that the collaboration process around guardrails as well was working for you and for Rippling JT. And that was a great overview, Paula, of the checks and balances in the AI agent usage process as well. And also just thinking about how we co-work best with them. So just moving on a little bit, thinking about what you said just now, Paula, you said ongoing monitoring of like what the agent's actions look like is also quite significant, just looking at the historical decisions and how they've been made in the past. So just curious what I guess everyone thinks about how should teams validate and monitor these agentic systems on an ongoing basis rather than like a point in time. Really vary from case to case, and it can differ depending.
Yeah, sure. So I think at Sigma we approach this in two different levels. So the first one is around monitoring the output quality. So essentially, there are multiple signals, but I think the most relevant one is the override rate, and I think JT mentioned it a little earlier. So the customers can set a percentage, and they can decide if above or below this percentage they're happy with the findings of the agent, right? So if we have a very low percentage, then it potentially means that the analysts are happy with the agent findings, so they're in line and they trust what the agent found. If it's above the average or above the percentage, then it potentially means that there's something off or something that is miscalibrated, and we need to obviously look closely into it to understand what to adjust. And on top of that, which JT mentioned earlier, is the feedback loop, right? So you give a thumbs up, a thumbs down, you change something in the findings, you provide a feedback to the agent. These needs to go back to the system straight away, and we want to monitor this very continuously and not just every 6 months, 1 year when you go through training cycles, because obviously that would mean that until you go through a training cycle, you're not getting these improvements, you're not getting this live feedback that the analysts are giving. So we really want to monitor the quality of the output constantly and continuously. But at the same time, we have other checks that are running internally. So we have set of different cases that we run periodically. We monitor the output. We want to have consistency. If something is not consistent, it's all around understanding why and documentation again, which I think GT you touched upon it earlier as well. So I would say those are the two ways that we do for monitoring and validation.
Great. No, it's definitely, we will be seeing this a little bit later as well when Paula, you go through the EDD agent, but yeah, we definitely support a human in the loop model. We definitely think about like what they screen and what they can act on in terms of evaluating what the agent puts out and also making sure that everything is sound regulatorily as well. So moving on to thinking about regulators then, yeah, I'm just thinking, what are regulators really looking for when they think about AI explainability? And they say that it's important for compliance teams to prioritize that. So what's the third say of what is explainable, maybe in this context? And this is open to everyone to answer.
I think like it's all very new, right? Like I think regulators are like they're still trying to think about, at least like in my experience dealing with state regulators, like thinking about like what they should be testing and what they should be looking out for. For the first time in the last multi-state exam that I was a part of, we actually got a question from one of the states. It was a very high level question. It was just like a yes, no, if you have it. But essentially asking like what our oversight of AI is, like what governance policy, do we have governance? Do we have policies and procedures? One of the questions was, do you even use it? Right. And it was like very open-ended. And I think my advice, and I think what we should do is like, we should try and stay ahead of the curve here, right? Like we know they're going to ask about it at some point, right? So as you're building AI, either in-house or using, an amazing tool like Sigma360, it's like ensuring that you have that governance piece in place. And being able to produce to a regular, like, hey, like we utilize AI and we've utilized to make our workflows more efficient. And here's our oversight of that. I think it's only a matter of time before they actually start testing those workflows.
Yeah, and I think to add on that to Danny's point is they're catching up, right? I mean, like I think the questions they're asking are very basic, right? Binary, do you use it and how? But I think like jumping ahead to what's important is, model validation is required, right? Sigma obviously has a lot of guardrails, but the expectation is, as a company, you're doing model validation. And this is where it gets, a little bit controversial. Controversial, not the right term, but difference of opinions, where some folks say like, well, it's the same process as any kind of model, right? To validate. I'm going to push back a little bit, and I think it's a little bit different than validating a static model, right? Like a traditional scoring model, the same input produces the same output, right? Pretty much every time. So the validation is just mapping it once and then monitoring for drift, right? Here, it's like with an agent, you could have two similar cases take completely different reasoning paths and then come to the same conclusion, right? So basically, what you have to test for is like, is the range of acceptable paths something that you're comfortable with, right? And like I think that's important. You test outcomes, not just the paths as well, right? But of course, like as you have these models, you got to sample cross variation, right? Making sure that you're comfortable with those edge cases, define what is normal, and then QA, right? Making sure that like as you're using agents, like and we have a human in the loop. I think we'll talk about that later, but you still have a QA process in place, right? Where we get down the rabbit hole is like, do you use a agent for QA to test the agent, right? Like we're not there yet, but like really interesting thought process there of what that would look like. So I think like the model validation piece is important, right? If you go to a regulator and say yes, we use AI, to Danny's point, like the documentation piece is critical, right? How'd you get comfortable? What's your ongoing monitoring? What's your ongoing testing that's being done? So really critical aspect to answer those regulator questions.
For sure. For model validation, it seems like a structure is really needed, making sure that like the range of paths, as you said, JT, is all viable. In the case of like maybe testing one specific entity. So maybe we can make this a little bit more concrete. And Paula, I'll invite you to show us our EDD agent. Walk us through how we're building the EDD agent to handle an investigation and reflecting the direct feedback that we've gathered from Rippling and JT as well.
Yeah, sounds good. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see the screen?
We got it.
I can see.
I can see it.
We got it. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. So I will start with how we structure the configuration piece of the EDD agent before jumping into an actual case. So we created a concept of modules, which is what you see over here in the screen, and think about modules as different risk dimensions of an enhanced due diligence, right? So an enhanced due diligence is all about understanding risks and mitigating those risks to understand whether you want to keep doing business with the entity or not onboarding it in the first place, or offboarding, for example. So we work very closely with the Rippling team to really understand what would be the core aspect of a risk analysis that you would need to conduct based on, for example, information that you get during the KYC or KYB process, things around the industry risk where the entity is operating in, anything around whether it's a politically exposed person or if there are any adverse medias. So we really work closely with the team to build up a library which is available from day one. So essentially, you can take any of these modules, you turn them on, and they're already up and live from the very beginning. So you don't need to go through very tough or complex or long implementation cycles or configuration cycles, but you can essentially use the day one module from the very beginning. On top of that, the cool thing around the module is I'm just going to pick one of them around source of wealth and source of funds, is that the modules are true. They're available from day one, but they're also customizable. And this is something that GT mentioned earlier as well. You might have different policies, different procedures, different risk appetites, and that's totally normal and totally understandable. So we didn't just want to provide it out of the box library, but it's also a configurable library. You can take an existing module and apply your own customizations or just create a new one from scratch. But the core idea is that if you would use any of the modules that are coming out of the box, there's full transparency on how they're built. So we wanted to provide really clear and transparent overview of what the instructions are, what the agent is going to assess, where it's going to get the information from, how is it going to interpret such information. And I think this is crucial because it's a lot about trust. And the trust comes from actual transparency. It's not just trusting that we know what we're doing, but it's also being really able to touch it, to see it, to configure it, and to read it yourself. At the same time, they're configurable, right? So if there's anything around the existing instruction that you're not happy with, you can adjust it with your own policies and procedures. And the same thing apply with defining risk, right? Each company has a different risk appetite, and you should be able to define it yourself, and the agent should be able to surface the level of risks based on your own risks. Once the modules are being configured, or once the existing modules are being turned on, we can jump straight into a case. So this is essentially a case that the agent has already processed. And I think the core essence here, which is what also JT mentioned earlier, is really that all the tedious work that an analyst would normally take hours or even days, depending on the complexity of the case, is now being done in a bunch of minutes, right? So we don't want to take away the decision-making part, which these needs to stay with the SMEs, which are the expert in the field, which are the investigator. But we want to take away the part that it's around looking for information, copy pasting, retrieving data that sometimes is not available in the open web, right? If you would use, for example, a regular large language model, you would primarily have access to what is available in the open web. Obviously, using the Sigma agent, you also have access to what is within our data ecosystem, right? So you would have federal filings, you would have corporate registries, all the entities that we have in our platform. So there's obviously a big benefit from getting the risk intelligence information that we built with many years of being in the industry, and not just having information that everyone has access to from just an open search research. The agent then comes up with the different findings, right? So the modules that you configured before are being analyzed based on the instructions you gave. And very importantly, as we mentioned earlier, there's a feedback loop, right? So the analyst should really be able to read the findings, read the risks analysis, providing feedback, and seeing this feedback going live from the case after, and not having to wait for months until something changes. The way we built the agent reasoning, it's around not only surface findings, but also understanding risks. And I think this is something that is a big differentiator, because on enhanced due diligence, we know that it's not just a level 1 alert. It's not a basic investigation. It's really complex. It takes a lot of expertise, but it also takes a lot of risk analysis and mitigating analysis to really understand there's a risk in this entity. Do we want to do business with it? Yes or no? So the agent should really surface what the most experienced investigator in your team should do, and not just being a raw data dump or just a list of searches that he conducted. That's very easy, and that's not really helping the investigator work. On top of that, I think one aspect that I would like to share is around the associations. Which I think is also a big differentiator, right? Because an enhanced due diligence is not just about the entity itself, but is also who is around this entity. Do we have beneficial owners? Do we have executives? Do we have people that are associated also from an indirect point of view? And again, here, by leveraging the network analytics that we have within Sigma, we are able to surface those meaningful associations and do a small EDD on them as well, so that in the moment that the investigator is looking into the enhanced due diligence case, is also able to see who is linked to this entity. Is it relevant? What risks do I find in those owners, for example, or executives, or people that are simply associated with my main entity? One last thing before I just wrap it up. we provided something that I think is really useful, which is around having a confidence score, which is the one that you see over here with sufficient. As we said earlier, you shouldn't just trust an agent just because it says something. You should really be able to see how confident are we with the information we provided. Sometimes data might be wrong. Sometimes there could be pieces of evidence that are contradicting. Sometimes we might not be able to find enough information on an entity or on a specific information. We don't want to just provide information for the sake of providing them, but it's also how confident are we with what we provide, so that from your side, you're also able to say, okay, we have enough information to make up a case, or maybe the information we find it's not sufficient or is contradictory, so that you also have this extra level of confidence that what we provide in here is not just made up by us, but it's really baked with sources that have been properly analyzed, but also we're providing a confidence level. How confident are we with those sources? So I would say, just to wrap it up, from really the benefits that come out of it, I think one of them is really the support that we give to the human, right? As we mentioned earlier, the investigations take a very long time. They're very tedious, and most of the work is being done with copy pasting and getting information from different systems. We don't want experienced people, SMEs, senior investigators to do this job. We want them to be the decision makers, and the agent should just be an enabler for the decision maker. Should just make your life easier, better, giving you as much data as you need, but you are on the driver's seat of the investigation, right? And another piece, I think, which is really relevant, is around the quality, I think. So it's not just about the quantity. How many cases are you able to do more? How many businesses are you able to onboard faster than before? Is also around quality, right? So the EDD agent it's supposed to be like your best investigator. It's not just supposed to be something that speeds up the work, but also allows you to do the work in a much better way and in a more confident way.
Thank you, Paola, for showing us
apologies.
the EDD agent. Oh, sorry, JT, you were speaking?
Yeah. One real quick comment, right? So I think like one of the reasons, out of many, but one of the reasons why Rippling and Sigma has such a good partnership is like similar business models, in the sense where, those of you who don't know Rippling, you should look it up, right? Basically, we want to be the company that you use everything for, right? So like they call it compound startup, right? So any type of software you need, HR, payroll, IT, management, finance, Rippling. They're doing the same thing on the Sigma side for financial crime, right? A full stack of financial crime products. So EDD has been really important to us. We're using our own LLM, right, which requires a lot of testing. Hallucinations are I wouldn't say an issue, but something to be very cognizant of. So like we're very excited to get on the Sigma platform for EDD. Again, like a full stack of like case management, financial crime products, and then leveraging right now with our own LLM, we're leveraging information within Rippling and then the open web, right? With this, and Paul hit the nail on the head, the advantage of this piece is like we're then using the massive database that Sigma has, which identifies a lot of, I would say, obscure or hidden or attenuated risk, right? That might be a couple hops away, right? So where I think like we're going to gain a lot of efficiencies through this is on the adverse media side. I sound like a boomer saying this, but like back in the day, right? Like you used to have an army of people reading articles overseas, seeing if it relates to a customer, seeing if it meets the materiality threshold, and then basically then escalating it up the chain, right? For somebody to take a little bit of a deeper dive. You need an army of people. We went live about a month ago with adverse media with 0 net new employees because of the agent, right? Where the agent goes through, we customize the materiality thresholds to meet our risk appetite. It then automatically provides a recommendation of whether it's a match or not, and then discounts those matches that don't meet the materiality threshold, and then provides a Gen AI summary of that capability, right? Of that risk. We dropped our reviewer time manually from 50 minutes to 5, right? The next iteration of that is once it's a match, then you open up an EDD case and do a full assessment, right? That's the type of efficiency gains that I think like clients or customers and companies are expecting compliance to enact, right? That seamless integration rather than jumping from one platform to the next, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that piece, kind of full stack of products, very similar to how Rippling operates in our business model.
JT, you just keep giving us a great review after great review. It's amazing. Super happy to hear that like the manual review process has dropped so much from 50 to 5 minutes, and also like the efficiency gains that it's brought your team. We're really excited to keep collaborating between Rippling and Sigma and having that feedback loop between our two companies with, as you said, two full stack solutions together. I think it's really important to keep that connection going for sure. Awesome. So I think we're almost at time. So I'm going to ask one last question to the floor. For a compliance team that's really getting serious about evaluating agentic AI, but hasn't started yet, what would you say are the first maybe like 2 to 3 things that they should keep in mind?
So I think I'm going to sound like a broken record here. But like AI is a solution. It's a great solution. It is not the end all be all, right? At least not right now. So be smart with how you deploy AI, right? Don't just buy something off the shelf or get Anthropic and just give it some policies, procedures, and let it go. The AI is only as good as the prompts you give it, the underlying data that you give it. And like you want to challenge it, just like you would challenge a regular IC. You want it to keep evolving with you and with your workflows. So as you're thinking about bringing on AI, just know like you have to train it as well. And it will give you the best efficiency possible. Like, JT said, and like I said, like, we're reducing over half the time a review takes. Also make sure that you have, like JT and I were talking about, you have governance in place, right? Because regulators, while they're asking yes, no questions now, it's only a matter of time before they're catching up, right? Like JT said, they're catching up. It's only a matter of time before they bring on AI experts to come in and really do a deep dive into the tools you're doing, into the underlying data there. So, stay ahead of the curve and keep challenging the agents.
Yeah, I think to build upon that, right? I think we haven't talked too much about this, but human in the loop is really important, right? I think like that's what we're doing at Rippling to making sure that like there is a human and SME reviewing the outputs and that they're comfortable with it and then providing feedback on it. At some point down the road, right? Maybe, more companies would get a little more comfortable with having the agent making some decisions. When you deal with sanctions and strict liability, so like there's a lot of focus on making sure you're right 100% of the time. But if you're going to dip your toes in the water, having these agents, to Danny's point, like model governance, testing, have human loop from the beginning. The other piece that I would add is I feel like there was like a period of time where folks thought that AI was free, right? Like everybody dove into AI and then they got that heavy bill from Anthropic. It was like, this is not free, right? So I think like when you think about the efficiency gains with AI, when you talk to your senior leadership, you can say that, look, we're not going to have to hire as many people. We might not have any zero headcount growth, but like there is going to be a cost to that, right? And that's what I would say. There has to be budget dedicated to that, right? So I think that cost benefit analysis is really important. I think like focusing on vendors and making sure that they're not throwing the kitchen sink and the most advanced models at basic questions is important as well. Token usage, limiting that, making sure that you're not incurring exorbitant costs of these searches is important. So that would be my last statement is I think we all realized AI isn't free, and then to include these efficiency gains in your budget for the upcoming years.
Definitely. I feel like very to keep in mind for sharing. It's really about understanding what's possible organizationally and surveying the business and seeing how AI can be implemented best. So that's all the time we have for our speaker discussion. Thank you to all for sharing so many great insights today on agentic AI and AI deployments and how teams should begin to evaluate them as well. We've had a few great questions come in from the audience, so we can dive into that now. So firstly, we have for a compliance leader who's under pressure to do something with AI, but if they're worried about regulatory exposure, what's the one AI governance step that they should take before agents start working with them? This is open to the floor. Anyone can answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think testing your model, right? I think like Danny hit the nail on the head is just don't go to Anthropic, throw some policy procedures, and then take these outputs and run with it, right? Is do take the time, build a document, right? It could be basic, but like build some governance around what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're comfortable doing it, right? It may not be perfect, right? I think we're all learning this, right? Nobody can sit here and say they've been doing this for 10 years on the AI side, right? So like we're breaking ground, but like do something in terms of governance to make sure that like you have some confidence around the outcomes and you're comfortable with how the model is operating, and then test it ongoing, right? I think Paula, Danny, Bernice talked about this, like ongoing testing. You can start small and big, right? Like building a project in Claude is like actually very easy to do, right? Building a gem in Gemini, very easy to do. But then the hard part is making sure that those outcomes are in line with what you'd expect.
Yeah, it's just having those, like JT said, having those controls in place. Like it could be, like the start could be something as simple as just QAing the outputs on a monthly basis, right? Like you give the AI agent 100 cases, so we're going to review 25% of false positives or true whatever it may be, just so you can demonstrate one to ensure internally that you're mitigating for any AI hallucinations, that you're agreeing with their outputs, but also externally to auditors and regulators to say like, hey, we have this piece of control in place to ensure, you know, we're producing correct results.
Definitely sounds great. And then we have another question that is, how do you see the human analyst role changing over the next 2 to 3 years as agentic tools take on more of the investigative workload, as you guys mentioned earlier?
I think it's exactly what we're saying. Like we can now spend more time doing actual investigations, right? Like, when I first started doing this, many years ago, like like probably 3/4 of my time of an investigation was like going to Google, going to Bridger, um, reviewing AML history, right? And like, we were all pressed for numbers, and it's just like it was like stressful. Like when you couldn't find a certain link, it's just like going down the rabbit hole. We all know that saying, "Go down the rabbit hole." We don't have to do that anymore. The agent does it for us, right? And we can be as analysts and as leaders in this space, we could just be more efficient, and that's how the analyst role will change. They could be more efficient. They could spend the time doing the actual fun stuff. I may be weird, but I think investigations are fun. I love doing it. So like we could do the fun stuff now.
Yeah, Danny, give me a good case. I'll nerd out on it all day and spend hours going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's right. Like I no one knows where this is going, right? But I think like what I had mentioned before is I think there is going to be a push to hire more SMEs. So like I feel bad for those kids coming out of college in the next couple of years, right? Because a lot of the work that they would have done, the investigative, the due diligence side, like you're having AI agents do that for you, right? And then also is I think an added benefit is you can cast a wider net, right? Before like scalability was a big issue. So like you had to like narrow your scope quite a bit and obviously make it defensible for auditors and regulators. But now you can cast a much wider net and maybe catch those risks that were outside your scope earlier, and then obviously have the agents, discount and assist with that. So I think that's a real benefit as well. And that's going to be the story that you want to share with regulators, right? If you're doing the same scope with AI and you're just gaining efficiencies, that's good, right? You're probably coming to like risk-based decisions faster and then finding the more high-risk cases faster. But like, what a great story to share. Like, now look what we're doing. We're casting a net. We're doing a lot more work than we ever have before through those efficiencies. That's really going to resonate.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with both Danny and GC. I think the analyst of next year is not someone who gathers a draft. To be fair, I think it's someone who challenge, who contextualize, who ultimately decide. So it's really what should remain within an analyst job is really the judgment layer, right? It's not the gathering and drafting work is not these pieces over there. I don't think that's reversing, but really what becomes important is really the human aspect to it, which is judgment, right? Which is decision making. I think that's the most important thing.
Well, it sounds like the future is bright then with Agentic AI, and hopefully we're going to see more analysts actually doing investigations and nerding out, as you said, JT, and SMEs being SMEs and really catching the risks that were previously hidden and might not necessarily be surfaced in the past. So that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for your time today and for your attendance. We will be sharing this webinar recording to you after the session, so please do keep an eye out for it in your email. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, the Sigma360 team. We look forward to connecting with you again in the future. Thank you so much.